The problems facing New Zealand's primary sector have been mounting at a rapid pace. So I think it's time for open hearts and open minds. Welcome to Sarah's Country, broadcasting from the bottom of the world from COVID-free paradise. As sadly, the US numbers have now surpassed those killed in World War I. New Zealand is the predator-free island, I suppose we can say now, in the South Pacific, that has life now flourishing back to normality. Please note that gratitude for our situation can go hand in hand with empathy for other countries. But we have to say and celebrate. Congratulations, New Zealand. We have once again, for a small population, punched above our weight. In Sarah's Country, we discuss the challenges and opportunities in producing the most environmentally regenerative and economically sustainable food and fibre that in quality and value punches well above its weight globally. I've been in rural media broadcasting now for a decade, and how far we've come as an industry is incredible in my mind. We still have a long way to go, but we are now having mature conversations about the environment, collaborative in-market competition, and respect for what is our social license to operate, and it's made me very proud. But not everything's improved, like the price of strong wool, but more on that soon. Have we improved? What has improved is the idea of going back to our tourist hotspots. No lines for Ferg Burger in Queenstown, and the thought of short queues at Mount Hutt makes me so excited. It's a massive one for me because it's blimmin' tiring being so focused on the road. I know you need to when you're driving, but from Christchurch to Cromwell, for those of you who know it, that intenseness with you don't know what you're going to get from tourists who don't know how to drive in our roads here in New Zealand, of which I need to let you know. We are taking a self-acclaimed, much-deserved week off Sarah's Country next week, and I'll be doing that road with no tourists. There's a lot of New Zealand that has had a holiday over lockdown, but me and Joel, the Irishman, we just kicked our workload up to the next level, didn't we, Joel?
Yeah, it just never ended, did it?
Do you know how many times he's yawned before we even started the show tonight? Look, we've got a 2020 election, which we need to ensure that our foot is on the pedal. So we decided we're going to hang up our headphones just for a week from Monday next week. So this week we'll be talking about it just so that you're prepared. Tonight, I'd actually love your suggestions in the comments for Joel. Joel, I'd like to see your face. Mm-hmm. And his partner, Sarah, on what they should go and visit when they're going to head down south. Christchurch through to Queenstown and up the west coast. Go on, be good, hospitable Kiwis that I know Sarah's Country viewers are. Be a good tourist guide tonight in the comments, adding some ideas for them to do. Joel, what sort of things have you already lined up that you would like to do on your trip?
I think we might try and do one of those air tours.
Air tours?
Air tour, in like a helicopter or a wee fixed plane. They seem like a good fun thing to do.
Like over the glacier?
Yeah. Like over a glacier, like Fox's Glacier or something like that. Would be good fun. Okay,
so in the comments below, what do you think Joel and his partner Sarah should be doing on their week off? We are going to take a week off from Sarah's Country next week. Is it in Milford and Queenstown, Tekapo, Wanaka, Hawea, Fairlie even? There's some great things to do. If you're new to Sarah's Country, welcome. We invite you to participate at any time, as we said in the comments below, as we are listening and watching live across 15 different platforms. You can send us your questions for our guests on demand, and if you're listening to this on podcast, you can, of course, send us an email, sarah@periodmedia.com. Catch any of the interviews on YouTube. Coming up on tonight's show, after 7:20, I want to discuss where China's trade tensions are at with Australia in wool and beef, and will it have a flow-on effect to little old New Zealand, as countries are already adopting trade-distorting measures as their governments implement protectionist policies in response to the economic impact globally of COVID-19. I want to know, is Minister David Parker overloaded with too many portfolios? Jacinda Ardern doesn't think so. We're going to be joined by New Zealand International Business Forum Executive Director Stephen Jacobi to see just how vulnerable we are. Let's also talk logs with Mr. Jacobi as well. Please send in your questions that I can put to Stephen, because there's not too much this man doesn't know about New Zealand's trade relationship with China. New research from Lincoln University offers new hope to dairy farmers in the search for tools to reduce nitrate leaching to our waterways. And the genetic disposition of the cows themselves are delivering a big part of that solution. After 7:30, I'm so proud to be joined by doctoral student Cameron Marshall and Professor in Livestock Production Pablo Gregorini to discuss how to reduce nitrogen from cow urine by 50%. This is becoming global groundbreaking news. Nitrogen fertilizer will be capped from next year as part of the Action for Healthy Waterways policy. To close the show, we will discuss the science behind the policy decision with General Manager for Innovation and Strategy for Ravensdown, Mike Manning, as well as his thoughts on the growing regenerative movement here in New Zealand. Following his pulpit in this week's Farmers Weekly newspaper, which Mr. Manning has described regenerative as a lazy label and a buzzword. I'd like your questions to Mike in the comments below. But first up, straight off a Zoom call this afternoon with Minister Damien O'Connor, Carig Smith, the chair of the National Council of New Zealand Wool Interests, is going to update us on how we should feel about the government's intervention in an industry problem. That is, that wool working group report we've been waiting on. And what has come of the $11 million the government have put into Wool's Unleashed, that PGP program? Do you remember that one with New Zealand Merino? It was meant to fix all our strong wool price woes. All that after this brand new, fresh off the press, on-farm story produced by the wonderful Ash Robinson for Global HQ. Two-time Women's Rugby World Cup winner Bex Monaghan running a Tararua farming business with her husband Luke, but also breaking new ground on the rugby field.
This is Sarah's Country.
For us, the COVID thing has shown the importance of the primary industry and of farming. Having lost my contract with New Zealand Rugby, I've been able to carry on with our farming life as our primary income, and I like the fact that we are supporting the country. I'm so excited about what the future holds, and here's our opportunities to get stuck in even more so. We just need the support to do it. We're Bex and Luke Marnie, and we're farming in the Tararua. We've got 50 hectares here that Luke and I purchased last year off of his parents, and we lease 550 hectares, and then we've got another 50 hectare block that we've just managed to pick up to lease as well. Luke and I have got a fairly diverse business. We contract rear lambs for a sheep milking company. Luke's got a crutching business. We've got traditional ewes, traditional cattle, a few Frisian bulls, and a bit of rugby in the background, and a few kids to keep under control as well. I spend a lot of time reviewing and previewing games of rugby. Your business is the same. You're forever looking at things you could do better. And I think while you're always striving to be better, there's always going to be something to do, and there's always going to be new challenges out there to reach, really. Dad's always said to me, don't be fazed by negative opinions. You've got to follow what you believe in and what you want to do. And I think Luke and I will continue on the path that we're on at the moment, and wherever it takes us, it takes us. Obviously for me, rugby, there's some big goals for me with my refereeing, and when the opportunity comes, I will jump back on board and put the boots back on. And you know, I absolutely love the lifestyle that rugby gives me, but on the flip side, I'm pretty keen to get home to the farm and put the gumboots back on and chuck the hair up in a mop and carry on like normal. I think farming plays a huge role in the recovery, not only through jobs, through obviously putting food on people's plates, but also about enjoyment of life. The environment's amazing. The countryside we have in New Zealand is incredible, and the opportunities that people have to get out and look around are right in front of us, aren't they? How many places, how many countries and cities I've visited through rugby, and you know, the environments that we live in New Zealand are just incredible. Who wouldn't want to be a farmer? Hey, who wouldn't want to be? Look at it. It's paradise.
Well, it was due out in September 2019. That is the Wool Working Group report. We've certainly, of course, been chasing it here on Sarah's Country, and so has Annette Scott from Farmers Weekly, and a great article out in this week's Farmers Weekly around the mounting frustration of the stakeholders within the wool industry. So joining us now, hot off a Zoom call from Minister O'Connor, is Carig Smith. He is the chair of the New Zealand National Council of Wool Interests. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, and once again, thank you for having me back on your show. And it's true, I just have got off the big call with the Minister of Agriculture, and yeah, so it finally happened.
Did he do what all politicians do well and sort of not really answer any questions?
Well, when asked about the wool report, we got it'll be out in 2 weeks' time again. So which we've been having that since I don't know, so beginning of November last year.
Craig, do you think we should fly up there and just get it hand delivered on the steps of Parliament, because it keeps getting lost in that courier?
Yeah, well, I think in all fairness, it's not the report that the minister wanted.
Okay.
To be fair, it's and I think he's just going and he wants to post-COVID it. Is his exact words that he's after. So it's not quite exactly what he was looking for. I think if it came out as it is, it will just be another report. And credit to him, he doesn't want to release it, so it's just another report and file.
100%, absolutely, like you said. However, did you make suggestion around the consultation with those in the industry, or lack of?
Yeah, we did have a wee discussion around that, and very good minister speak came out, so that's good. But there is within the report, there is some elements of the industry that is missing, and his challenge to me as the new chairman of the National Council is to get out there and champion the cause of wool. And I've taken that on board, and I did that when I took over the chairmanship role anyway. So I'm excited about it. We're going to get on with or without the report as an industry. And one of the big things around the industry right now is that everyone is sitting in the same tent, and it's bloody fantastic. Everyone's the brokers, the exporters, the merchants, shearers, fed farmers, beef and lamb, Rons, the whole lot are all really dedicated to making our product the shining light that it should be, and it's not at the moment.
Craig, that's what I can't understand. And I've been on this about a few different areas here, whereby the minister has been correct in saying, where is this unified voice? There's no point all banging on our door. And there has been a lot of collaboration in the last 3 years, I must say. So why put something under a separate wool working group when he asked you to get all the stakeholders together to create this national council? Why not give you the funding to create that strategy document? Industry lead?
Well, I think he was just looking at it and saying, because there has been negativity, there has been so-called disjoint industry, that he needed to do it independently. But 2 years ago, when we all sat down and said, pretty much this is the report you'll get out, and whenever it's finished, and it's ended up exactly the same. It's just telling us status quo. There's nothing in there. There's a few bullet points about what we could do. But he did say to me that the report that I have been asked to comment on won't be the report that's going out to public. So it's going to be, a few changes. But as I said, I don't think it's a report he was really looking for.
Okay, under a National League government, we had a different strategy. It was a co-investment with industry under the Primary Growth Partnership. And one of those was $11 million from the government, matched with a following $11 million from the New Zealand Merino company, to use their learnings to fix the strong wool's woes under W3 Wool's Unleashed. What's your thoughts on where we've got to that and the outcomes from that program, Craig?
So I also brought that up with the minister today, and he said, "You're just bashing the opposition." I said, "No, I'm not." I said, "I'm very concerned that the outcomes from that PGP funding, and I'm even more concerned around the auditing that's gone on by MPI around the so-called outcomes that have to date have been cost the government taxpayer around $5.6 million to date. I think there's still another $6 million to go of government money to go in there." And the minister was very quickly to point out, he said he wasn't the one that gave the money to that PGP funding. So that was the other government. So it's kind of, I think that the easiest way to sum it up, it's as it looks right now and what's on paper, it hasn't worked. And there is no outcomes in that, from that PGP funding on the crossbred sector that I can see in the reports that has made any change to the crossbred wool price. Now, I also thought that maybe the $6 million may be even better spent as industry good, not just for one commercial company. And so, but that, I don't think we ever get across the line, but I firmly believe that $6 million can be spent a lot better than that it probably is going to be spent at the moment. So.
Yes, and I took an irate phone call this week from a member of the wool industry who feels terrible paying farmers such a low rate for wool and wants to do something about it. He was critical of government funding going into research and ideas, not into capital infrastructure for local manufacturing that has literally nearly been completely wiped out here in New Zealand. And moving forward with the localisation rather than globalisation that we're facing as a world, that capital investment into added value wool manufacturing is a huge need moving forward.
Yes, it is, and I understand where that person's point of view is coming from, and there is funding available. I think we need to make the funding more accessible, and there's a food and fibre fund that is available, and we need people to help you work through that, because we all know when we've looked at government funding applications, you need a degree to figure out what speech and what type of language you need to write that in. And for us in the wool industry, we know wool, we know how to speak wool. We don't know how to speak government funding applications. So I think that's probably more of an issue, because I know that there is funding there, and the minister was open about that today. He said the door is open, come back to me, and if there's funding there, we will definitely help you out. So infrastructure and capital investment is definitely a way forward, but I think more importantly what we need to do as an industry, and this is what I'm really going to take on board, is about telling our story. We need to be able to tell the story of wool, and people say, oh well, what does that mean? And the minister says, yeah, but you just sound like you and the old cronies at the wool industry are just us as consumers. We don't know about wool. We know about fast fashion. We don't know about wires, wool carpets. What do they do around VOCs, absorbing, all these types of things, asthma. I've just seen some really good stuff on healthy building, and so there's a lot of stuff in there that we've just forgotten to tell people about. And so that's what my big focus on. I'm really not, as much as I said to the minister today, I'm going to support, and the industry is going to support the wool report when it comes out. But in the meantime, we're going to get on and do something, because we need to. And
pass on around some of the wool carpets that can go into government infrastructure spend as well, Craig, I'm sure. No,
exactly. And I brought that up, and that's a really good point, right? So at the moment, I know that the kind of order, the state housing in New Zealand, or Housing New Zealand, if you go to their website's all about sustainability. It's all about renewal, being healthy, all these great buzzwords. And but they all put plastic carpets down, and they all put, really unhealthy stuff in these buildings. And I said this to the minister today, and he said, yeah, but, like we've got to look at the long term. I said, yeah, dead right. And I said, I know for a fact that the government now, today, has got quotes for new carpets into the new buildings. And I know one of the offers there is a wool option. And he goes, oh, they'll be way too expensive. I said, no, because I knew as a politician, that would be the first thing you would say. And I just said, I know for a fact they're only 7% dearer than the synthetic option that they've got. He said, well, if that's the case, then I'll be putting an inquiry in to make sure that goes in. So,
good. Good.
So and I know that's not going to fix the price of wool, but at least it's going to make people a bit more aware that how good wool is.
Craig, I just have to end here on one point that I heard this morning around the Australian Merino auctions being $10 a kilo back potentially when we come out of this. And this Australian-China tension, will that have a flow-on effect to our contracts here at home?
Well, there's long-term contracts, like with the company that I work for. We have long-term 3-year contracts in place. And so they were set 3 years ago, and so they're still in place, and I know other companies have got long-term contracts in as well. But what is going to be interesting is when we start selling fine wool here in New Zealand through our auction system. We will be just in line with what Australia is doing. So $10 is a reasonable number to be back on last year, which is sad. But when at the moment there's really only China in the market for fine wools, they're kind of dictating what's going on. But no, we won't be immune from that $10 at the time, from that price drop either. But saying that, the quality of the Australia wool at the moment isn't that great. So, it's kind of, yes, it is a long way back, but the better wools are still selling maybe $8 less than last year. But, it's still a long way back from last year.
And just for those who don't know, is this due to breaks in the wool from the drought?
Yes, and very low. Yeah. Basically, the drought is the one that's doing it. There's breaks, there's high VM, a lot of dust, yielding around between 50-55% yield, whereas here in New Zealand, our merinos are doing, on average, around 70%. So, the export is buying a lot more dirt than he is buying wool just about. So,
Craig, I could talk to you for a long time about wool. However, we've certainly got more guests to get to tonight on Sarah's Country. Now, coming up after the break, Stephen Jacobi, Executive Director for the New Zealand International Business Forum, will join us in continuing on that conversation around China. China wants to be part of the CPTPP now. And, of course, what is the flow-on effect from Minister Shane Jones trying to drive home the importance of us consuming a oversupply of log exports that China won't want. All that in Sarah's Country after the break.
This is Sarah's Country.
Well, it's always encouraging to know that you're here with us, listening and watching live. And of course, I can tell by the comments below. It's great to see us all rejoicing and celebrating in this COVID-free status. Michael Ross has said, congratulations, Kiwis. We look like we are winning the biggest test we're going to play in our lifetime. This has been the easiest part. The hardest part is keeping us safe. Thank you so much, Michael. And Dean Williamson is celebrating playing out the latest on-farm story. And of course, thanks very much to Rabobank for supporting that. Sue, I love your comments. How much has the wool report cost? I think there might need to be a bit of an OIA put on that one. Rosalie said, love wool carpets, love healthy buildings. Absolutely. That interview with Carig Smith was fantastic. And to put that to the minister, to assume, Minister O'Connor, that wool carpets were going to be ridiculously expensive. Who Actually, let's just work on supporting local. That is, of course, something very interesting going into our next guest. The primary sector is playing a key role in New Zealand's response to COVID-19, and our international standing is being enhanced by our reputation for producing high quality and safe food and fibre. Our environmental credentials and commitment to maintaining free and open trade. When we are seeing a decline in globalisation to global protectionism, trade commentators are dismissing the Chinese leadership expressing possible interest in joining the CPTPP. For those of you who don't know, that is the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement on Trans-Pacific Partnership. And they are saying this is impractical. So joining us now is a respected trade commentator and fan of Sarah's Country, Executive Director of the New Zealand International Business Forum, Stephen Jacobi. Good evening, sir.
Hi, Sarah. Good to be with you.
Thank you. Now, Stephen, the dream by New Zealand and the founding members to encompass all 21 APEC economies right at the start actually included China and the US coming into this Trans-Pacific Partnership. But now you're saying it was very ambitious, and Pahu, China's expressing their desire to join. I don't understand why. Why wouldn't we welcome that with open arms?
Well, yes, that's right. I mean, this has been a long-term dream, Sarah. I don't know, the antecedents of TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which later became CPTPP, well, they were set right back in when we signed a trade agreement with Singapore back in 2001. For 20 years, we've been working on this dream of a APEC region, an Asia-Pacific region, FTA, that would encompass both China, the United States, and all the other economies. To try to get there has been very difficult. It's been step-by-step process, and we got CPTPP. We thought we had the Americans, then they left. The Chinese were never keen, it has to be said, while the Americans were portraying TPP as something that excluded them. In fact, they weren't really excluded. Anybody could have joined TPP back in the day, but now they're coming back and they're saying, we want to be in, or we'd like to explore it. This is the first time the Chinese leadership has expressed that interest. And in this complicated post-COVID, and as you say, highly protectionist world, it should be of a lot of interest to New Zealand and the other economies, and I think we should be encouraging them.
Is that on the condition that the US isn't a part of it, though?
Well, they won't be in the position to make any demands like that. They will have to have their membership agreed by the existing members that doesn't currently include the United States. We'd like the United States to come back. We were sorry they left. I think there's little likelihood of that under President Trump. But if this agreement is going to really make sense, it has to include the region's largest economies. And although President Trump is taking a different, path on the trade question, who knows what might happen after the election. In any event, we can't just sit around and wait for the Americans.
What I really like about it is it's more than just free trade in terms of dropping tariffs. This is a lot to do with innovation, intellectual property, protecting the environment, raising the living standards of each and individual countries to have sustainable growth across the regions. You worry that China's own domestic policies and leadership probably won't make the mark to get to the high standards, what is now CPTPP.
Yes, and that is a potential kind of problem to be overcome. I'm not saying this is going to be easy, Sarah. I'm just saying it's going to be desirable. But it's a problem to be overcome. But here's the thing. If we want China to be more sustainable, we want China to respect intellectual property, we want them to do good things on the environment, we want them to manage their economy in the way that other economies manage their economies around the world, this is a really good way to encourage them to do it. The other way, which is to shout at them for a long period of time or poke a stick in their eye that we do from time to time, isn't going to work. It's never worked. It won't work. We have to show China that these things are in their own interest. And I think that's why CPTPP is a very good strategy.
What about how much reliance we have on the Chinese market until they don't need us anymore? We've seen that with our dairy genetics, and certainly looking down the barrel of the same with our wood log exports. What are you concerned about that particular market forces at play and how our government is trying to dictate the long-term outcome of that?
Well, just on the diversification question, obviously New Zealand's interests are promoted when we have a variety of markets to choose from. That's what we want for our exporters, particularly markets that can turn value to farmers, forest owners, and whoever. But it's not always easy to find those markets, and that's the problem. China is our largest market because they want to buy what we have to sell, and because the FTA we negotiated has made it very advantageous to do that. Now, if there were other markets that we could find that would be like China, that would be very good. But the fact of the matter is, at least for the time being, there aren't. Today, the Trade Minister, David Parker, had something to say about the negotiations with the EU that are not going very well. There's been a leak of a negotiating document, a market access offer for dairy products, which is not very advantageous. So look, there aren't other alternatives for China. We can't replicate that. But still, we need to keep diversification on the agenda, and I think that's what we do to our other trade negotiating efforts. But on forests, if I've got a minute, on forests and logs, what we're seeing the government try to do at the moment through something called the Forests Amendment Bill going through Parliament is to put pressure on foresters, particularly smaller foresters, farm foresters in particular, which, as you know, count for quite a large part of the forestry industry, to put pressure on them to send their logs for the domestic market. Now, that's not going to be in those forest owners' interests. It's not going to be in the interests of encouraging new planting, and we think it does represent an untoward intervention in the free market, the domestic market, and we'd rather they used other ways to try to stimulate wood processing in New Zealand.
And tomorrow night on Sarah's Country, we're going to be talking to Kerry Warsnop around the free market that is being able to sell your sheep and beef property to anybody to plant in trees. So there's sort of a couple of sides to that story, Steve. It certainly is. I got a couple of things I want to ask you about. You mentioned Minister David Parker. Jacinda has come out in support of him not being overloaded with too many portfolios. Trade is extremely important to our economic recovery. What's your thoughts?
Well, Trade Minister David Parker works very hard in the portfolio. He came to it new, but he has really done quite a good job. He's been very onto it during this COVID period. You know, they've negotiated supply chain agreements with a whole lot of countries. They've been stepping up on air freight. I don't think we could fault his attention to the job there. It's true that he may not have the time to lead trade missions in this post-COVID period, but he's got two associates, Damien O'Connor and Nanaya Mahuta. Maybe he needs to make more use of them.
Yes, absolutely. Now, lastly, I heard this morning on Hosking talking around beef and wool in Australia being locked out of China. We obviously have a very strong free trade agreement with China. However, some of these price blowbacks will come down the chain. Stephen, are you keeping an eye on that?
Well, we are keeping an eye on the general situation with regard to Australia's relationship with China. I mean, we should take no delight in the fact that they're in difficulties. I mean, their barley exports are now being subject to tariffs. Some of their largest meat processors are being blocked out of the market. I mean, maybe that could actually open up some market opportunity for New Zealand and China, not so much in barley, obviously, but that'll be going to the Americans. I would love to explain that to Australian farmers, but and there will be consequences because we may face increased competition from Australia and other markets. I mean, clearly, it's in everybody's interest to find a way to get on with China. Obviously, as an independent, in New Zealand's case, we have an independent foreign policy. We want to have our views heard on certain things like human rights or Hong Kong or Taiwan and all those sorts of things. It's not without importance. But we need to keep all this in balance. and we need to make sure that we deal with them in a very respectful and open way.
Thank you so much, Stephen Jacobi. I've run over the first two straight off the bat, Joel. My apologies, but two bright-minded men to kick off the show. Stephen Jacobi, Executive Director there at New Zealand International Business Forum. And you know something we need to keep in balance? Hamish Cave has written in, for the last 25 years, we've been told what a great product wool is. Makes absolutely no difference to the price of wool. Investing in breeding sheep with no wool. Absolutely. What sheep farmers have to do is balance wool versus meat and which one they're going to chase. And that flow-on effect from trade certainly does have an impact. Now, coming up after the break, we're going to stay here on campus. That's Lincoln University campus where Sarah's Country is broadcast. We're joined by Professor Pablo Gregorini and doctoral student Cameron Marshall, who proudly have got some groundbreaking science about how they've found a gene that cows that urinate 50% less nitrogen. All that coming up in Sarah's Country.
This is Sarah's Country.
Really pleased we got into this. Thanks for your help, Dave.
It's a good idea, honey. You reckon it'll come out? Cover it and tell compound to leave it 10 minutes. You'll be fine. Good call, Dave.
Good call on getting those security cameras, Dave.
You call a new one yet?
Yeah, kind of.
When you've got decisions to make, we'll be there to help you make the right call.
I'd go for those ones, Bob. Yeah, good call.
Did you choose these?
Oh, you know.
For great advice and insurance, talk to FMG.
Now, a promising development in genetic research has identified cows with the low milk urea nitrogen gene urinate less nitrogen. The research project has found that dairy cows with a certain phenotype excrete 28% less nitrogen than others through their urine, diverting much of it into milk protein instead. This hasn't been a new concept, but it's the first independent verification of this concept. Joining us now, Lincoln University Professor in Livestock Production and Head of Centre of Excellence here at Lincoln University in Future Land Use, Pablo Gregorini joins us, as well as PhD student Cameron Marshall. Thank you for joining us on Sarah's Country. I know you gentlemen have certainly been around the traps of media attention, not only here in New Zealand, but around the world. This is a significant breakthrough, Pablo.
Yes, Elisa, and thank you very much, Sarah. Good evening. It's fantastic for us, from Lincoln University, to have a student fully funded by the university to bring this news to dairy farmers and livestock producers around the world. So for us, it's an immense pleasure to come out with this news.
Fantastic. Cameron, can you start us with what led you into this particular field of research here at Lincoln University?
So I actually did my undergrad here at Lincoln as well, and I guess I've always had an interest for the dairy industry, and one day in one of Pablo's classes we just got talking, and one thing led to another, and here we are.
Okay, so the science around it, Cameron, what's been involved in this research? What sort of undertaking from a field research trial perspective as well as within the lab, so those watching can understand how much is involved in finding this gene?
A lot has gone into this project. It was an outdoor grazing trial, so we had every day had to move animals and shift animals around to make sure they were getting fed the right amount. We sampled them on a regular basis where we took urine and fecal samples. We also took some blood and other samples. So once we had those samples, we had to take them to the lab and we had to process them to a state where they were ready for chemical analysis. And then once we conducted all of this chemical analysis, it was time to do some stats and find the results we found.
Pablo,
one important Yep.
How significant is this study for the future of dairy farming and in conjunction with the environment?
Well, it's pretty significant, not only because it is something that the farmers have available right now. So some cows, their own herd, can be selected for this phenotype. But it's also important for all farmers around the world as well. We have just published this work of Cameron in a journal, which is top in environmental science. It's Science for the Total Environment. And so this is, well, I would say this has become viral since Friday when we released this news. So, yeah, it's very important because farmers, utilizing this available technology, if you like, can not only reduce in a very, very fast manner, if you like, their environmental impact on the waterways and greenhouse gas emissions, but also they can comply with the United Nations standards for sustainable development, that farmers utilizing this natural technology, if you like, getting into a more resilient and future systems, will take 3 of those standards.
So, Cameron, in regards to the significance, how much less nitrates will be sort of coming out the end of these particular types of special cows?
So in our study, we found a 28% reduction in the urine urea loading rate in a urine patch from the animal with the highest breeding value to the animal with the lowest breeding value. So this 28% reduction run through a model from Dee and Cameron here at Lincoln University resulted in about a 40 kg difference in nitrate leaching per hectare per year.
So across...
One of the things...
sorry,
I keep interrupting you like a good Argentinian. But one of the interesting things is like Cameron's, when he analyzed the difference between the highest and the lowest Camerons, right? He found a difference of 163 grams of nitrogen difference. So if we consider that in normal situations, a cow excrete around 350 grams of nitrogen per day in the urine, this is massive. Massive.
We're effectively talking of halving the extra nitrogen that the cows do not need. This is excess to what they need to be able to produce milk and the energy levels within the fields. It's just more efficient use, isn't it, of the nitrogen applied and then consumed and out the other end.
Yeah, it is definitely more efficient. Especially if you see, what Cameron said, animal as a part of the solution, not as a problem anymore. If you can see that, these phenotypes of cows, not only divert more nitrogen to milk, right? So they have a greater content of milk protein, but also they divert a little bit of nitrogen to feces, which is more environmentally friendly than urine. So this is a fantastic conglomeration of results that farmers can use right away.
Cameron, what made it special for you doing a research here at Lincoln University versus other options for you post your graduate program and going into your PhD?
I guess what made it special for me, I've made a lot of contacts in the area and the science community around Lincoln with the Crown Research Institutes and at the dairy farms and local dairy farmers. So I guess I wouldn't have had those contacts and that support if I'd gone and done this research anywhere else. It was a great, I guess, building blocks I've made over the last 4 years at Lincoln that I've now been able to, if I have a question, I know who to go ask, and I can just knock on their door or give them a call, which I don't think I would have been able to do anywhere else as easily.
such as Pablo as well. I'm sure he's been a huge part of this. Congratulations, gentlemen, on such a huge achievement on behalf of the New Zealand farming community as this goes viral around the world. We're very proud of you here, not only from Lincoln, but of course across the country. Now, to close the show, next up, we will be joined by Ravensdown General Manager for Innovation and Strategy. We're going to get his thoughts from the Fertiliser Cooperative on how they believe we can reduce nitrogen, as a third of dairy farmers might have to cut nitrogen fertiliser under a government-imposed cap on its use.
This is Sarah's Country.
Everyone's been talking about food these days.
While we've been busy stacking shelves, there's a whole team behind us.
But it's hard work too.
And we don't grow it without help.
Nutritious food needs nutrients. Our soil tells us that story.
By testing, we know what the soil needs.
We make the nutrients right here in New Zealand.
And we've got it
when you need it.
And we get it to where it needs to go.
As farmers, we have a really important role in turning sunshine and water and nutrients into an edible product, and we don't take that lightly.
It's great to know we're putting food on the New Zealand dinner table.
So we can all come together.
We've got to play our part in keeping the farmers growing what they grow, whether it be grass or fruit and vegetables.
Pleased to be part of the production line that keeps the industry moving and keeps people being fed.
I have been speaking to a farmer and they appreciate what we're doing.
They're really happy that at this critical time of the year for their autumn applications, our stores and supply networks have stayed open.
You're proud and privileged to be part of the team.
Thanks for the hard work, team. Let's dig in. And let's do it all again tomorrow. Cheers.
Fantastic to have your comments coming in below. Michael Ross has said, pricing is not the same as value. What is greater value to New Zealand is every department, government department that is, using wool carpet instead of products that is difficult to recycle. This is, of course, our synthetic products and our carpets that do not have a good environmental footprint in compared to wool. You look on any of the government websites and they want to state sustainable, environmentally friendly infrastructure. So let's get wool in our government buildings and our schools and our New Zealand state housing. Wouldn't that be fantastic? Let's keep pushing it, New Zealand. Farmers, advisors, councils and government-appointed scientists have been blindsided by the news nitrogen fertiliser will be capped from next year. This is at a maximum of 190 kilos a hectare, and this is part of the Action for Healthy Waterways policy. And a story out now in this week's Farmers Weekly, which you can read online, farmersweekly.co.nz. Richard Rennie has done a great story talking to a range of people. It's titled End Limit Surprises. Ravensdown Innovation and Strategy General Manager Mike Manning said the cap invites farmers falling below it just to simply ramp up application. Mike joins us now. Good evening, sir.
Sarah, good evening. How are you?
Good. Mike, have you had any further developments since this article in understanding the intention for Action for Healthy Waterways? And I particularly want to see my question to you is the difference between what is going to be a blanket national standard and the difference and variance between our regional council standards.
Sure. So look, the first thing about the national cap, if you like, Sarah, promulgated at 190 kilograms of N, is disappointment. Just to contextualise that, if I could briefly, and the reason for the disappointment is this, that we all know the evidence is really, really clear that what affects water quality, which we're so all interested in, is the losses from the farm. Tinkering around with those other things doesn't directly influence that. Let's model, let's measure, let's understand, let's mitigate the losses from the farm that affects water quality. Now, we'd all started down that path, and indeed Overseer, which we've put money into and the Crown has put money into, does exactly that. It's aimed at those losses coming from the farm, not tinkering with the inputs. And so to go backwards just seems to be so retrograde and disappointing.
Okay,
Sarah.
so clarify this to me. Outputs usually are connected to inputs, and leaching is usually connected to a farm management system, which has obviously come about from the growth in dry matter from the input, such as nitrogen.
Look, you're right. The key thing is there are a mosaic of farm systems, and as a consequence, there's a mosaic of footprints. And rather than tinkering with those inputs, let's measure what exactly the farm system the farmer is choosing to run, what inputs he's using or not, and what's the losses. And if the losses are above the limits typically set by regional councils, right, what then can we do to modify the farm system in particular? And Lincoln University did this. What can we do to modify the farm system to reduce the losses? That's where the golden nuggets lie, not, as you say, tinkering with, well, what types of fertilizer am I using, or what types of pastures, or what types of stock, or what types of systems. Trying to be prescriptive about that is probably not smart. Looking at the losses, measuring, modelling those, and mitigating those is probably the big opportunity where it lies.
And Massey University freshwater ecologist Professor Russell Death agrees with you in that the cap is merely a sticky plaster. What other tools could the government have put in place to ensure that farmers actually stood up in terms of their farm management practices and acknowledged those nitrogen losses in another type of measurement?
Sure. So one of the areas the Crown has, and I was at Mystery Creek about this time last year, Sarah, where the Prime Minister and the Minister for the Environment, David Parker, and the Minister for Agriculture, Damien O'Connor, released the package of helping farmers. Among those package of assistance given was some $40 million on overseer. So that was a really good signal. I think if we look at how far overseer has come since then, probably not fast enough, despite some money being available. So if we could speed up the developments in overseer as a model enabling smart decisions to be made to reduce losses, that'd be one area. To go faster in that area as opposed to what Russell Death said is sort of tinkering with the sticking plaster. So that's one area I would say. Go faster with overseer, for example, so that we get better control and management of the outputs.
Yeah, certainly. Okay, before I get into your pulpit that you've written for Farmers Weekly, Mike, around the lazy label of regenerative agriculture, I just want to explore the proposed cap on dairy farmers and how considerable will this be across different regions around New Zealand, reducing that to 190 kilos.
That's a good question, Sarah. So all regions in our modelling will be affected, but Canterbury mostly among the regions. But all regions will be affected. But as you appreciate, in any range or population of farmers, say in Waikato or Taranaki above 20, there'll be a range of them. At the top end of that range in those areas, we'll have to come back to the 190 cap. But in the places like Canterbury, up 2/3, up to 3/4 of farmers will be affected by this cap. That effect will flow through to production and their profitability and export revenue to the country. So it's material. It's material for the country at a time when the country most needs the export revenue. So it seems an odd thing to be doing in my view.
Mike, I do have to ask, being an employee of Ravensdown, a fertiliser company, is this cap certainly because of the profitability of your company? Because I know that you've heavily been involved in innovation to reduce and have precision of fertiliser and reduce the need for as much.
That's right, Sarah. So we're fortunate that Ravensdown is a cooperative and it's run by the farmers. And the farmers who sit on the board of Ravensdown say, look, we want the best technology for our farmers. Now, if it means less fertiliser sold, that is fine with us. We'll right-size our business to suit. There's never been a problem or a reticence to use technology or systems that reduce fertiliser, because that would be in the interest of the cooperative members. So we're prepared, and the directors are prepared to right-size the business if the technology would lead us in that direction. So that's the power of a cooperative. You make a profit, you don't maximise the profit, and if you need to right-size the business, then the directors are up to do that.
And what if your farmer shareholders want to pursue regenerative agriculture, Mike?
They're at liberty to do whatever they want. And so we absolutely respect their right as people who want to follow the organic route or the biodynamic route or the biological route or any other route. That's their choice. We respect it. What we are empowered to do is give good science to our farmers to make an informed choice so that when they do choose, they have the best information. And that's really what we're empowered to do and strive to do, Sarah.
So yourself and Jacqueline have had a lot of things to say about regenerative agriculture and the government's support of that particularly. Could you please explain why the government and the Primary Sector Council's vision shouldn't include the word regenerative?
So it's contextualising it. In many ways, fortunately, New Zealand is almost an exemplar of many of the principles of regenerative agriculture. For example, good organic matter levels in our soils. So if you look at our pasture soils, often the envy of the world for organic matter level. Second one is that the soil should be covered in pastures for most, or plants for most of the year. Pastures are. That the pastures or plants should be grazed by animals. New Zealand pastures are. So many of the things that they talk about, we already do. I think the opportunity lies more for people in Europe and the US, I think, Sarah, than New Zealand. Can we learn things from some of their regenerative systems? Yes, we can. Are we miles behind? No, we're not. Are we, in my view, the exemplar of agriculture on this sort of basis in the world? Yes, we are. So I think it's once people understand, hey, we can pick up a few things, and we should, but are we miles behind? No. So there's no need, I don't think, to tip the system upside down.
Okay, Mike, last winter we saw a anti-winter grazing campaign explode in Southland and incredible sediment runoff and loss from poor break feeding behaviour in Southland. And so you're still saying that you believe we're an exemplar in the world in regards to our grazing management systems?
Look, I do. Does it mean we get it perfect? No. Are there some things we can improve on? Yes. But if you look at the biggest part of our farming system, it's pasture. And for the most part done well. Yes, there are things, and you've pointed to some, that we could and should and must do better. But overall, the gap's small rather than big. It's not a chasm, it's a gap. So yes, you're right in South and Sarah, we must do better and we can do better, but that shouldn't condemn our whole pastoral farming system.
So why come out and call it a lazy label?
Well, because I think the people who promulgate it just need to sit down and have a good, hard look at the science. And if you would do that, you would see the evidence is that we're performing pretty well. It's not to be arrogant, because it's not who we are as a nation, but we are performing pretty well. So what we just say is pause, examine the science, pick up the publications, understand why I've been doing rotational grazing since the 40s and 50s. Understand those things, and many of the principles you espouse we're already doing. Can we do some of them better? Yes. Need we do some of them better? Yes. But is the gap big or small? I subscribe it's small.
And would you look to collaborate on some of that scientific funding and work into, bringing that chasm you explained together around what is best for your farmer shareholders, Mike?
Absolutely, we would. So I've written some articles. Our Chief Scientific Officer, Ance Roberts, has written them. Jacqueline Routh has written them, and others have written them, and say, look, here's the information available. We'll list the publications. We'll list the data where it came from. We'll encourage you to do the work and have a look at it. So we're more than happy to cooperate and show you where it is. We think we've got some room for improvement, yes, but as you say, not a chasm the size of the Grand Canyon.
Thank you so much, Mike. I always enjoy our chats. Mike Manning is the General Manager of Innovation and Strategy at Ravensdown. There we go. a cooperative that may be cooperative between different farm management systems that, of course, the farmer shareholders want to trial out across New Zealand. I love Sarah's Country. It's always about open hearts and open minds, regardless of whatever your opinions and beliefs are around how we produce and aspire to be the best in the world. Because as I opened the show, little old New Zealand, we punch well above our weight, and let's not stop anytime soon. Good evening from COVID-free New Zealand. Have a wonderful evening. Good night.
This is Sarah's Country.